Hello, it's John Heaton, and today I'm going to sum up what I can only describe as a superb weekend in Liverpool. Long weekend, arrived on the Friday, went back Monday morning, did and saw everything I was expecting, and if anything, it surpassed expectations, and that's kind of saying something. We got into Lime Street around 3 o'clock, having flown into Manchester from Budapest, and we walked to our apartment and then got ready for the evening with a warm-up drink in the Philharmonic Pub, which is just next door or opposite the Royal Philharmonic Hall, and that's where the first concert on the Friday evening was. And I was with my mates Colin, Henry, Madeline, my son Richie, and James Griffiths for that particular first evening. And the first half was a kind of George Harrison tribute band, basically doing the whole of Concert for Bangladesh. And the guy playing George wasn't the best singer in the world, but he did dress identically to George, with the white suit, orange shirt, and the beard, and the hair the same length. So if you half closed your eyes, it was like seeing George at Bangladesh. And the guy at the back looked a bit like Jim Keltner with his shades on. So it was a pretty good tribute. Joey Molland was not really featured in that first half. He just came on and played acoustic for All Things Must Pass, and then shared the vocal for If I Needed Someone. And I think that's all he did in that first half. But the highlight of the whole evening for me, by far, was the second half. I mean, this really was a very moving experience, because you had three members of Lennon's double fantasy band, Earl Slick on guitar, Tony Levin on bass, and Andy Newmark on drums, together playing, from what I've heard, for almost the first time since the double fantasy sessions. And Tony Levin the next day was saying he'd literally not played these songs since 1980. Earl Slick said he'd played a few of them because he gets requested to do a double fantasy song every now and then in concert, but Tony said he hadn't played them. I'm not sure about Andy. And they basically had Mark McGann on vocals. I was wondering who's going to do the Lennon vocals, and superb choice in Mark McGann, who has played Lennon throughout the years. He was in the film John and Yoko, A Love Story, which came out in 1985. He was also in the late 80s musical Lennon, which was in the Dominion Theatre, Charing Cross Road, corner of Oxford Street. Saw that performance several times. He knows how to sing Lennon. He's got the mannerisms. He's got all the ad-lib vocals. And even when he was doing the Milk and Honey, he was doing all the ad-lib stuff like I'm Stepping Out, and it was just brilliant. The Andy Newmark's drumming was spot on, absolutely superb. Earl Slick's guitar was amazing, and he was actually embellishing some of the songs from Milk and Honey and making them sound like finished products. So the whole end result of this is hearing them play these songs was about as close as one could get to what the 1981 tour would have been, because you had three members of the band plus Mark McGann doing a superb job on vocals. Some lady came out and did a couple of Yoko songs, not Walking on Thin Ice, they didn't do that one, Kiss 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 and Hard Times Are Over. But anyway, as I say, very close to how the 1981 tour would have sounded. Maybe a bit Yoko light, because there were only two songs featured here. But a very moving experience, and so glad. Even though we were sitting quite near the back. The venue at the Philharmonic is not particularly huge, so I would say, similar kind of size to something like Hammersmith Odeon. So even if you're near the back, you still get a pretty good view. My only slight criticism was that I would have liked Tony Levin's bass to be turned up a bit, because I was particularly interested in hearing those wonderful bass lines, and I could hear them, but that sometimes they were a bit low in the mix, I felt. Perhaps the whole highlight of the entire show was when they did Grow Old Along With Me and made it a finished song, because of course it wasn't finished on Milk and Honey, and Tony Levin was doing these intricate little bass lines, and they'd only started rehearsing the day before, so I think it just came to him naturally, and he just did these little licks, and it was just beautiful. So that was just amazing. On Saturday we went on a tour of the Beatles sites. James Griffiths drove us around in his car. We visited the Empress Pub, Arnold Grove, where Ringo lived. There was a rather irate neighbour who, when we parked the car and started walking towards Ringo's house, she shouted, "It's only a house, I don't know what's so interesting." Anyway, we walked on. Obviously, she was oblivious to Beatle fandom or dismissive of it or whatever, but we ignored her. And we went and visited the Empress Pub, which, to my disappointment, they painted half of it in psychedelic colours, so it doesn't actually resemble the Sentimental Journey cover too much anymore, which I think is a shame. I've heard rumours that it may be being turned into a Beatle-themed pub. Anyway, Arnold Grove is supposed to be a really run-down area of Liverpool. Didn't seem that bad to me, or maybe it's improved over the years. Then we moved to Arnold Grove, where George first lived. Similar type of really small house he spent the first few years of his life in. And then in the car, we drove quite a distance to Menlove Avenue and Mendip's, John's house, where he lived with Aunt Mimi. That was fascinating. And then not far away from that, we drove to Paul's house in Forth Lynn Road. We weren't allowed inside, but we looked at it from the road. And then we went to Walton Church and we found Eleanor Rigby's grave, and then we found the church hall, which I'd never been to before. And in that church hall, they've actually got the little place marks where they think John and Paul and Ivan Vaughan, who introduced them, were standing when John was first introduced to Paul, or vice versa. And Paul famously played 20 Flight Rock. So that was in this church hall. Very, very nice to be there. And there were a couple of people in there who knew John and were chatting to us. That was nice. Penny Lane, we also drove down, and you can still see the shelter in the middle of the roundabout, although it's a bit derelict now, and they were trying to turn it into some kind of Sergeant Pepper bistro, but it looks pretty run down and derelict, so I don't think it's being used for anything. But anyway, the shelter is still there, and the barber shop is still there, but it's not owned by the same people as it was in the 60s. Saturday night we went to the Grapes pub, where the Beatles used to hang out, and the White Star pub round the corner. And then Sunday was all about the Adelphi Hotel, and that's where I met up with more friends of mine. Andrew Brooks, said hello to Adrian Allen, who's been writing these great McCartney books. I'm going to review it. This is his latest, which he gave me a copy of kindly, and so thanks Adrian for that. Nice to meet you finally. And then we heard talks from Joey Molland at 2 o'clock. Fascinating talk, although the guy asking questions was not the most knowledgeable or incisive in his questions, and it took him about 25 minutes to get onto the subject of Badfinger, whereas most of the people in the hall, well, I can't speak for everyone, but most people in the hall wanted to hear about either him playing on the Imagine Sessions or Concert for Bangladesh or Badfinger, and talk about some of the songs, particularly some of Joey's songs like Suitcase and Sweet Tuesday Morning. But it wasn't the only question he got about Badfinger was about the song Baby Blue and the song Without You, which I thought was a bit shallow. But anyway, minor criticism, because Joey came up with some very funny stories. And then we had Earl Slick and Tony Levin gave a joint presentation with the same guy asking questions, again a little bit ignorant in his knowledge of certain things. For example, he said you played with John on the day he died, and obviously most fans know that Walking on Thin Ice had been laid down, the basic track, like weeks before, and they were just overdubbing and mixing it on the night John died, so that was a bit embarrassing. But anyway, after these interviews, we were allowed to queue up for autographs around the back of the hotel, and whilst this limited one's time with the people to like 30 seconds each or something, we could sneak a photo in here and there, and we could get an album. It's supposed to be only one album signed, but I managed to get a couple, and I handed some to my friends who didn't have any vinyl with them, and they got them signed for me. So I ended up with Station to Station Bowie signed by Earl Slick, Double Fantasy, and I'll show you the Double Fantasy signed by Tony Levin and Earl Slick here on the back. I was hoping to give them my silver marker, but I'd forgotten by that stage to give, because I bought this special silver pen, and I think you'll agree it looks brilliant on this autograph that Joey Molland. So I recommend, if you're ever going for autographs, buy a silver or a gold marker pen, because it makes a big difference to the autographs. This is my Season of Glass Yoko album, which Earl Slick and Tony Levin played on, and they both signed that. I tried to ask Earl Slick about his solo on Silver Horse, saying it was superb, but he didn't seem to know what I was talking about. In fact, he didn't even recognise the album from the back cover. He said, "Which album is this?" I turned it round, he says, I'm on all of that. So he didn't really answer my question about the specific track that I asked him about. But anyway, that's that. I get the feeling Earl Slick's memory is not the best, but anyway, it was very nice hearing them talking about Double Fantasy and how they were chosen, and how Earl Slick said he had to keep it a secret when they knew they were going to record with John Lennon, but he wasn't allowed to say anything. That was one of the hardest secrets he's ever had to keep. And this is Ringo, the fourth album, which I gave to Tony Levin to sign. She signed it very nicely in the silver pen there. And he said, wow, I haven't seen this album for a long time. But I wanted to just give him that album because I knew that most people would give him Double Fantasy, so I wanted to give him something a bit different. And I've been getting into the Ringo the Fourth recently, as you'll know if you've been watching my videos. Picked up the sheet music for Molland Guitar for £5. There were all these record store holders, but for once in my life I wasn't particularly interested, or looking at vinyl wasn't my priority, because I was there primarily to meet these people. And picked up this Beatles green 76 single back in the USSR, a Twist and Shout, and interestingly it says on the label, taken from the album Rock and Roll. So no mention of the White Album or anything like that, so that was interesting. But then I was just with Madeline, like looking at the records, and I said, should we try and grab Tony Levin and Earl Slick on the way out, because they will have finished their autographs. So we went round the back and they were literally just finishing up their autographs and packing up to go home. And Earl Slick kind of walked one way and Tony Levin walked out of the hotel. So I literally thought, bloody hell, this is my chance. So I walked after him and caught up with him and said, Tony, I just wanted to tell you that when I met Yoko a few years ago, she said that you were the nicest member of the band to her. And he goes, oh, wow, thanks for sharing that information with me. It's very interesting. And I complimented him on his bass line, on Walking on Thin Ice. And he said, yeah, I really have to listen to that again. I haven't listened to that in years. And I said, is there any reason you didn't play that at the concert on Friday? And he goes, no, I was just told what I was played what I was told to. And then we said our goodbyes, and he was very friendly. Got a picture of him, not with him, unfortunately. But anyway, that was, and then in the evening, Earl Slick and Mark Hudson and Joey Molland played together as a band, and they did a couple of Badfinger songs, Come and Get It, Baby Blue, No Matter What. Earl Slick did Gene Genie, David Bowie, Rebel Rebel, David Bowie. Mark Hudson was singing lead vocals on Oh Darling, amongst other things, and they did a cracking good job. My only slight sadness is that Joey was kind of relegated to sidesman, but I guess, you know, in the grand scheme of things, a lot of Bowie fans out there who want to hear Earl Slick, and that was he basically was centre stage if anyone was at that evening concert, and he played it. He was on fire with his guitar playing in both the Friday night and the Sunday night. So that was a good way to end the weekend, although we went to the pub after that, and we stayed up till 2 all of the 3 nights, and got Domino pizza on the way back to the hotel all 3 nights. I just want to say hello to all the people I met in Liverpool who came up to me, some of them who watched this channel, and nice to meet all of you. Can't remember all of your names, unfortunately, but you know who you are, so thanks, nice to meet you, and thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.